It's so interesting because we're talking to you on a Monday afternoon. Tomorrow you celebrate your 70th birthday. You went to meet the Queen earlier on this year. It's all going very well for you. I wonder whether you come back here is because you like to inspire younger people to reach your success, because you didn't have the most glamorous upbringing, did you?
No. There were many wonderful things about it, but no, it was a very typical West Riding working class childhood. And it was fine. You know, people these days ask me when they meet me now and see where and how I live, it must have seemed awful when you were growing up. Well, of course, you didn't know anything different, and everybody else was living in the same way, hand to mouth. My mother and me hiding behind the sofa when the rent collector came to the door. I mean, literally, because we didn't have the rent. But I can only say since I came back, the last 6-7 years have been the best years of my life. The last decade has been a fantastic decade. The 70 part is the least attractive to me. I don't know how that came about. It's a complete mystery to me. 70 doesn't sound like me. It doesn't feel like me. I feel as though I ought to be behaving a little bit more in an adult fashion than I usually do. I mean, there I was at Silverstone yesterday afternoon, screaming in the mechanics pits, in the McLaren pits, and yes, I did take a trip to the Palace just about a month ago. All these things have come together at a time that take my breath away, because I never expected these honours to come my way. They were things that happened to other people, not to me. And so the success of the last 6 years of deciding to say no to Hollywood and yes to British theatre, not knowing whether I would be taken back into the fold of the British theatrical world or not. I felt the first thing I did here was Antony and Cleopatra at the Royal Shakespeare Company, and I remember standing behind the scenery on the press night, writing the reviews in my head, which were basically along the line of, who does he think he is? But it hasn't turned out like that, and so I'm a bit dazed by it all, frankly, but delighted, nevertheless, delighted because this has been brought up once or twice on the distinction that some people feel, and certainly I do, that this has brought to my local community and to the place where I grew up and how I grew up, and those people who were significant in putting my feet on the path that has led to where I am today.
You've had an exceptional career, and it goes from strength to strength. When we look at the different parts of your life, from Star Trek through X-Men to Shakespeare, they're all so different. You make it sound very humble. Oh, I was lucky to get this, and I thought I'd try the West End again. I mean, they were never going to say no. You're an international megastar. Are you really this humble?
Alex, it doesn't feel like that. Believe me. Yesterday afternoon on the starting grid at Silverstone, I was talking to a member of the royal family, and just at that moment, Lewis Hamilton caught my eye, and his face lit up, and I had to say, "Excuse me, sir." And the thrill I felt at standing there on the grid. He was already in his race suit, shaking hands with Lewis Hamilton. I felt like a kid again. So it's not any kind of false modesty. I do feel lucky many times over from the very, very beginning, and I've taken some risks as well. I've chosen to do things. There were people who thought I should not have gone to Hollywood and done Star Trek. People who thought I was letting down my theatre background. People in Hollywood were amazed and dismayed that I said I was giving up that life and coming back to England. The whole business of taking on the job of Chancellor here. They've all, in a sense, been gambles, but without risk, without having a shot at something, not knowing whether you can pull it off or not. I find that stimulating, and I find in a strange kind of way that's what keeps me feeling youthful and certainly not feeling 70. I was 40 a couple of weeks ago, is how it feels.
You're just acting 70.
Well, I'm not, you see. You know, somebody who was 70 wouldn't have been behaving like a kid on the starting grid at Silverstone yesterday. And the other day I was doing a signing thing for Star Trek, and my son, who was there with me, who's also done Star Trek, came over to me and said, "Dad, there's the whole of the Tottenham Hotspur 1970 squad over there signing." What? I abandoned what I was doing. I mean, I know, and I'm shaking hands with Bob Wilson, you know, and it's just fantastic for me. So that is how I view life. I get a great kick out of it. I get a great kick out of everything I do. And I wander around saying to myself, "Patrick, can you really believe this is happening?" And it feels right for me.
When you see yourself in the old days on the TV, is it you, or is that like your son or some other actor?
We didn't know when Star Trek began really what was going to happen. And I was the last member of our company, of the crew, to wake up to the fact that we were a hit. I was in denial about it for a long time. And I do remember I bought, at the start of the second season, or maybe it was halfway through the first season, I bought a new car. I bought a Honda. And I remember Jonathan Frakes, who played Commander Reich in Star Trek, saying to me, "Patrick, you have a poverty mentality. You bought a Honda, perfectly good car, but, you know, you could have perhaps bought something a bit fancier." And I was thrilled with my Honda. I was really pleased. It was only the second new car I'd ever owned.
Do you think you've made it yet?
Well, what's just happened, this trip to the palace and meeting the Queen, that has given me pause for thought and made me reflect on the fact that an acknowledgement has been made, some notice has been taken of what I've done more seriously than I ever considered it, and that it perhaps does count as an illustration of something that, just like my poverty mentality, I was in denial about. You know, that that a certain place in the life of British theatre, and that means so much more to me than having a place in Hollywood, because it's all I ever wanted to do. When I was 15, 16, I had no ambitions to work in Hollywood. I had no ambitions to be a movie star in front of film cameras working with other big stars. All I wanted to do was be on a stage, if possible, speaking blank verse, if not the next possible best thing. And that's what the last few years have been like. And my level of satisfaction is profound, and the pleasure I get out of my work only gets greater year by year. I love my job now more than I ever have done. And I found I've just finished doing a play in Chichester in which I actually played William Shakespeare in this play. And I suddenly realized, Patrick, you've got inside you, there's a quality of peace, of quiet, even in the middle of, extremely emotional scenes, that wasn't there before. So something has obviously changed, and it's to do with confidence, self-assurance, and a belief that, all actors have this thing. All of us say that we have this fear we're going to be found out. You'll go on to do a performance and somebody will say, "Oh, come on, you can't fool us with that." And that feeling, I think, has gone, that I might get found out.
It's interesting, when I look at people like you and Sarina McKellen and Simon Callow, you're really hard workers. You could have a much easier life. Turning up at a theatre 8 times a week isn't easy, is it?
Ian is still doing it. You mentioned Simon and Ian and myself and Ronald Pickup. We were doing Waiting for Godot. We did it for 22 weeks, and I was worn out. I was exhausted. Ian McKellen is still playing that role in the same production with another cast of actors, and I love turning up to do a show. I still get a thrill out of it. Sir Ian, on the other hand, he would live there in the theatre, I think, if they'd let him. He used to come in at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and he'd have his afternoon sleep in the theatre, then wake up and do the show, whereas I would have it at home and come in for the performance. It's to know that every night you are going out in front of an audience who want to be there and are excited to be there, and some of them for the first time, given what Sir Ian and I have done, the X-Men and Star Trek and Lord of the Rings. People come to see Gandalf, they come to see Captain Picard, they come to see Magneto and Professor Xavier, but instead what they get is Sam Beckett and William Shakespeare and Edward Bond, and so that's thrilling too, to know that those people are there, but that I can tell a story differently every night in front of a live audience, knowing that will be a one-off, unique experience. It's such a privilege.
When you come back to Mirfield, are you that little boy hiding behind the couch with your mum trying to avoid the rent man? Does it take you back to a place that you were there 70 years ago?
Well, funnily enough, I was back in Mirfield on Saturday. And I can tell you why I was there. I went to visit the Father Superior and Father Prior and the brothers at the Community of the Resurrection, which is an Anglican monastery, an important Anglican monastery, which is in Mirfield, and was what Mirfield was once upon a time most famous for. It's probably got a little bit of competition now, because I've agreed to be part of a campaign to raise some funds, because the church is badly in need of restoration. I first appeared on a public stage at the age of 8 or 9 in the Quarry Theatre at the Community of the Resurrection, and I said to them, if only because of that connection, I'm very, very happy to be part of this. But before I went over to Batty Ford to the community, I just took a little drive around my neighbourhood, and it gave me goosebumps. I went past the house I was born in and lived in for 15 years, a one-up, one-down house in a yard, and what impressed me most about it, I've been back before but not for a long time, was not that everything seemed more ordinary or duller. What was extraordinary was that distances, measurements have shrunk. I always thought the street I lived on was a long, steep street. It's not. It's very short, and it's not that steep at all. But in reflection, it seemed to be. My life back then is very vivid to me, and I have now started writing a little bit about it, about what it was like. And so I shall be living back there in my head a great deal, I think, in the coming few years. And that sound you hear in the background is the Vice-Chancellor closing the door, because he needs me, Alex.
I'm going to let you go. Very finally, congratulations on being you. You've brought so much pleasure to so many different generations, and giving back here at the University of Huddersfield really just sums you up, really, that you care. With funding in the news and all of this stuff, you'll never lose that passion, will you, for the youth and giving them a chance?
I got a chance. I got my break at Mirfield Secondary Modern School. It wouldn't have happened if I hadn't have been at that school with that particular English teacher. And so if I can throw in any way opportunities like that in the way of young people, particularly those young people which this university seeks out and encourages, whose families and backgrounds does not prepare them to expect higher education. And we have a significant number here in Huddersfield. That makes me especially gratified.
Very finally, your tip on looking like you when I get to 70. What's the key?
You know, I remember they used to ask this question on the Wilfred Pickles Have a Go show. Do you remember? Have a go, Joe. I cannot tell you except that I have loved my job for 52 years. Loved it. And I think I was very lucky in going to California when I did, because Californians do know how to take care of themselves. And I got into that culture of sensible eating, exercise, regular medical checkups, looking after myself. And that has stayed with me ever since 1987 when I went. And I think that was very significant. And you know, there's a lot to be said for being happy, if you can find it.
So Patrick Stewart, thank you very much for talking to me. It's a great honour, and congratulations on all the work you do here in West Yorkshire, and especially for the University of Huddersfield. Nice to talk to you.
Thank you.